to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host, Rich Gear, here as well. And we have a regular here, comes here from time to time, Derek. Glad to have you again. And we're
Good to be here.
gonna talk about what his Derek Marshall's mechanical engineering music. That sounds like something of a tongue twister here.
Yeah, I guess that's a mechanical engineering musing. I'm going to be musing.
So what's the
very
title?
musical. I'm very musical.
This is called the Evolution's Regression Test.
I like it.
That's
Okay.
actual computer engineering.
All right.
And so this is something that I'm familiar with because I'm a computer engineer as well, and this is something we haven't quite. I don't think this is something that's actually done often enough. When you get down to delivering a piece of software, if you've actually done enough regression testing to see if any changes that you've made, you really have made a difference in the way that the rest of the code that you already written.
What I'm finding is in my line of work, I do programming on machinery, and what got me on this subject was that I was the machinery that I'm working on has to report to the corporate office, has to report to the upstairs what's going on with the machine, how many parts it's made, what's the cycle time. And I was adding this section of code, and this section of code is very memory intensive. And what happened was a section of code that I added was actually, that memory piece was actually being used by another part of the program. So even though my machine was reporting away, I was affecting another aspect of the machine's operation that did not come to surface until we ran the machine again.
So hopefully everyone out there, I'm basically stuck between two nerds today, so I can't really, there's not much I can do here. So Doug, when you say regression testing, how does this pertain like to evolution and all that stuff? I'm not quite sure how this works. So
Well, we're sort of applying it to mutations.
okay.
You take the code that is in DNA and in your and the stuff that makes up your genetic material, and if you make a random change to it, how is this change going to help the whole process?
Affect the rest of it.
And that's something that Derek is talking about here. You wouldn't take and just plug any old number into your machine and expect it to work properly.
Take a little piece of code, just throw it in there and hope it works. Even that's what I do most of the time anyway, not really.
yeah.
Well, it's like what you were saying earlier, Doug, is that regression testing isn't done as often as it used to because there's a lot of time constraints in development of software, development of machinery, and some of the stuff, though, you absolutely have to do. Like, for instance, when I overwrote this little section of memory, my machine went crazy the next time we put a part into it. Arms were going when they were not supposed to. So it was immediately apparent to me that something memory-wise was wrong, so I went back, was able to find it.
So is that what a regression test is? Is if you made a change to see if it affects anything else? Or I'm not exactly, okay.
Here's a really easy way to put it. Say if you have a computer and you want to add a new software to it, or a new application to it. Sure, your computer will have an enhanced functionality, but you want to make sure that the rest of your programs still work too, right?
Right, okay.
And that's exactly it. We can't be sure with evolution, and especially the scientific aspect of evolution, which means you can't add a new feature to something and test whether it works while the existing basis is not constant. So if you're adding something new, but your basis is not constant, your basis is changing, you can't test in whether what you've added is improvement or not.
Well, isn't that the whole point of, or at least for my way of thinking, is that macroevolution, we're talking about we're taking changes, making something new from something old and something brand new. We're not talking about variation within a species here. We're not talking about switching around. We're actually you're talking about adding something. In my understanding, we really don't see new things added, at least not new positive developments for the most part. The positive the positive things they've talked about usually ends up deleting something, or there's a secondary positive, maybe help because you're in a certain environment that, like the bugs who have no wings, stunted wings, on a windy island don't get blown out to sea. But that's not an improvement in the species. That just helps in that environment. or the blind fish in the black cave. I don't think anyone would think having no eyes is an improvement in the genome. But you're saying even when you do that, if you could do that, you'd have no way to test that to make it work.
The blind fish in the cave, let's look at that.
Okay.
The blind fish in the cave, because the cave is dark, but also the cave is full of sulfur dioxide gas. Okay, who knows why the fish is blind? Is it because it's dark in there, or is it because the gas burned its eyes out? That's something that you can't test. You can say darkness is my control, but in the background you have gas, you have all sorts of, you may have dust, you may have other items or compounds inside that cave which cause that condition.
Because they are both environmental conditions, and our friend Jared Bergman, Dr. Jared Bergman, has mentioned. Obviously, it's not unique to him, but I would guess, but the environment has the ability to turn on or off certain triggers that are built into the genome to start with. I guess which is kind of interesting and fascinating to me. It's like when you design a machine. Do you put in backups and fail-safe things if something goes wrong? That something else maybe kicks in. I mean, it's not maybe as complicated. It's not nearly as complicated as a DNA molecule, let alone hundreds of them. But still, the same principle kind of idea that you guys try to reverse engineer or try to figure out what would happen if something shut down here. Make sure the machine doesn't totally mess up, so you can still produce. So
another example would be if you have a new animal or something added to an environment, and really there's nothing genetically that's changed here. It's just you're taking this new species of creature like this pretty purple flower called purple loosestrife, and you bring it into your
causes a lot of loose strife, I tell you, in Michigan. Yeah, that's true.
And so here's the emerald ash borer, coming in from the wood that comes from overseas. You have a new thing that's introduced into this whole scheme of things, and it's wreaking havoc. And so this is
lost a bunch of ash trees in my house.
The first idea of 4 that I want to put across is that evolution is not scientific, because you cannot test for all these environmental conditions that are changing while you're holding one thing in control, like the size of a bird's beak or the size of an organism's ears. So evolution, since you cannot test, you cannot use or bring to bear the scientific method. And if you can't bring to bear the scientific method on something, it's not scientific.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the first point. Evolution is not by definition unscientific, because you cannot bring to bear the scientific method, which is developing hypothesis, developing experiments, obtaining results and drawing conclusions.
Yeah, we have
with evolution in the past, non-observed, but even if you could try to observe it now in the present, you still cannot control all the environmental factors.
We're going to show that evolution is scientifically impossible, statistically impossible, mathematically impossible, and logically impossible. And so we'll take the first point here. You just
we pretty much did the scientific. You cannot test if something's evolved. That means adding a new feature to it if the existing basis is not constant.
Of course, what they've done recently, they've changed the rules of what science is.
That's what you have to do.
That's what you have to do.
Move science away from the scientific method.
Exactly, and that's what they've done in recent years, because we live in an irrational time. I had talked to a friend of mine recently, and he said, how do you talk, how can the way antithetical reasoning is, if point A is true, point B, which is its opposite, cannot be true. But in our postmodern culture, people say, why can't Jesus both be God and not God at the same time? That's kind of where we live right now. And evolution is perfect for that kind of it's actually, I don't know what it's the chicken or the egg, which, whether it caused it or whether it was just an outcrop of the way the culture wanted to go. But that's the way people think. But you got to expose the fact that it's not scientific in the real idea of what science is, and that's what you're brought to bring up.
But I have some examples for the audience of some very simple scientific experiments that anybody would be able to tell that's not a good experiment. For instance, one is, if you had a strain of corn that you were mixing with the DNA with a strain of wheat to make the corn more green, unless this is an actual experiment and stuff like that. you do this, but at the same time, unbeknownst to you, your graduate student is feeding nitrogen to the plant while this experiment is going on. Okay, you couldn't control the basis of that plant growing in the dirt by itself, the only change being the change of the genome. And so the lushness of the plant could have been caused by the enhanced nitrogen content of the soil. Or could it be so that's not a good experiment, you know.
Yeah.
Another example, this is an experiment that I've actually done, was moth growth versus temperature. Okay, so you have moths that are in the cooler temperature, moths in the warmer temperature. Well, inside the cubicle that had the moths with the warmer temperature, I had a little heater. Well, the moths grew, right?
Yeah.
But the heater introduced noise, which caused the moth potentially, because of its large antennae, to not be able to find its food as well, or be able to find its food too well. So you have something that's interfering with the moth's ability to find food, and you're looking at what its growth is versus another type of moth or another moth. So those are examples of experiments where the control is not held in check. It's spoiled, so you can't.
But they are able to do certain experiments, obviously a lot of different kinds of things, where they can make the controls. What you're saying with evolution, by its very nature, you'll never be able to do any of that. You're showing us things that can throw off the control, basically.
Right.
And in nature, there's everything that can throw. I'm not everything, but light.
Right.
Moisture.
I have a list
so
of
many things, you know.
Here's a list of environmental factors here that I came up with in like 10 minutes off the top of my head. Food, poisons, water, shelter, friends, neighbors, enemies, predators, temperature, pressure, friction, chemistry, exposure to sun, light, darkness, sleep, sound, smell, wind, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Each one of those environmental factors is like a bit in a long binary number, which you could stretch out for hundreds and hundreds of places, which causes this idea of all the environment equals one huge number. Each one of those is being a bit in that number, or that changes. Mm-hmm. So what that renders is the environment represents a very huge improbability of you existing.
But even so,
and the thing about it is evolution says that a organism is basically a product of its environment. It's a product of the selection pressures that are brought to bear on it. Mm-hmm. So if an organism comes from its environment, and you have all these billions of environmental factors, you can never define that organism. It can never be defined by evolution.
Even all what you're saying, the environment, you still can't. They've still never seen anything where anything new's been added.
Right.
I mean, we have never observed it. Never observed it. That's a breakdown right there with all the environmental stuff. It's all this hypothesis, speculation, and basically, I don't know what you're going to call it. It's not based on any
It's a
real
little bit of a
evidence.
later point of why it's mathematically impossible. We're going to talk about indistinguishable differences by parts.
Okay.
But I think we're going to move on to next is that it's statistically impossible because of all these variations. How evolution is supposed to work, how we're told and taught that it works, is over billions and millions of years, over millions and billions of organisms. One organism of the group will rise above the other ones and be that special one of the billions other that died. That this is the evolved organism. This one successfully got its longer beak or whatever, or its bigger ears. But in the meantime, all these other millions and billions had to die. So the reason why I say evolution is statistically impossible is if you go out in the field and you find a fossil, there is a 1 in a million billion chance that fossil was the one special one that was evolved. Chances are, like infinity to 1, that was an unsuccessful organism and therefore cannot be used as an example of evolution.
Well, I've heard the thing too, later on we talk about the evolution of man. There aren't enough skeletons out there to show that these millions of billions even existed.
Right.
That's statistically.
Where is what I call the evolutionary
Where is the evidence? Where is the...
And I would even argue that the Earth can't even, the crust of the Earth, and I've actually started to do some calculations of the crust of the Earth, can the crust of the Earth hold the organic material required to evolve the number of organisms we have
Today,
creeping
yeah.
on this earth. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't even think the crust of the earth could hold it. It takes so much organic material to get one good one. You got to have a billion bad ones.
That's
Or
right.
a trillion, or 100 trillion.
Yes, yes.
It's
Billions
so-
is a low number.
Billions a low
right?
number. You're talking about hundreds of trillions. You know, it's the every time we go into calculations, right? Time we go into the statistical things, you enter these with this one with about 800. You know.
Yeah, and it's like the thing I bring up often about the tail of the snail. You know, the snail's job is to move the entire Earth over to one side of the universe and back one molecule at a time, and it only moves at a rate of 1 millimeter in a million years. And then you have over here your protein factory making proteins at the rate of 400 tons a second. And at that rate...
400 tons a second.
Yeah.
Okay?
And so you have new proteins all randomly, but to have a useful protein that actually has all the same left-handed amino acids in it.
Right-hand sugars.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
by the time the entire Earth has been moved over to the other side of the universe and back, the entire universe will be filled with these proteins that you just made. You can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. So is that the statistical?
That's the statistical argument. Is if you go out in the field, the whole, at least the pseudoscience that the evolutionist brings is, hey, look at this fossil, look at this bird dinosaur, look at this fossil. You can't look at that fossil because chances are very, very small, very, very slim to the impossible slim. That was an example of a successful evolved organism.
And you can't tell that
Just our
this
time.
Australopithecines fossil that you're digging up is your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa.
That's right. You can't, and he wasn't successful. He died a failure.
Yeah, he's a
all failures.
dead end branch.
We're not the special or evolved. And that goes even further when we get into the logical argument.
You know, this frog that died millions of years ago, he just simply croaked, right?
Yeah.
But whenever you try to bring in deep time, or lots of time, lots of numbers, big amounts of sequences, or you're getting into the realm of mathematics. And mathematics does really well.
But even they recognize it. When you looked at the earlier writings, when they started going into deep time, you're talking about a few million years in the beginning. Went back in the early 1800s when they started talking about deep time, and then they got into millions and hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And because they kept realizing that there's not enough time to do what they were at that. Part of it was the ability or the inability to really know how complicated, let's say, even something is quote simple, and it's not simple as a living cell. Okay,
Right.
they thought it was just a glob of jelly, based on a simple thing of protoplasm. So from that perspective, they realized, and as they got realizing how much more ribosomes and cytoplasm and nucleus and all these other things that are going on, and the things that they do, it's like everything in a cell is a factory itself. They kept making the time deeper and deeper. We're finding out there just isn't enough time in the universe, no matter how they stretch it. If they get up to now, it's 8 to 12 trillion years, right? Or is that the old universe is now? 8 to 12, something like that.
Billion.
Is it billion?
14.7 billion.
Oh, it's billion. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's how old the universe is.
But even if they had 8 to 12
How do
trillion,
they
it wouldn't
know?
be enough time.
Yeah, but that's what they say with they observe.
So what happened at that point in time that caused the universe to exist?
Well, now you want to talk another statistic. How that some infinitesimally small piece of whatever it was, something large in everything we see now.
Right, and it did it in these tiny little increments. And that's what I want to talk about.
Well, not the Big Bang. If you use the Big Bang.
Oh, yeah, don't even.
That was like, whoa, and then suddenly, one little bit at a time.
When these little bit at a time over a long sequence is one reason why I say it's mathematically possible. And I'm going to explain this idea called indistinguishable differences by parts. Imagine and imagine a whole huge, I love Ford Mustangs,
No,
a whole lot full of beautiful red Mustang convertibles. And they all are red. They all have black convertible tops. They all have the 5.0. They all have the 4 on the floor. They all have the positive traction. Okay? Somewhere in that description, you need to decide which Mustang you want. But if they're all identical, except for deep inside the differential, there's a stainless steel fastener holding the gear to the... That's the only difference. It's useless to be able to discern between these Mustangs unless you know what the difference is. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you don't know what the difference is, these Mustangs are indistinguishable. And that's what you're going to have if you evolve organisms. You'll have indistinguishable species, you'll have indistinguishable organisms that the only way you'll be able to tell the difference between them is if with knowledge. Is if basically if you were God.
Well, the thing about it is that to get the Mustang in the first place, that's a design. Right. That's a design element.
You're comparing this to a point mutation.
Yeah,
right.
I read that a point mutation. Yeah, and but even to get to the Mustang in the first place, it's so.
Yeah, and a change in the genetic material doesn't explain the origin of the genetic material.
Right.
So here's an idea with the same Mustang, okay? Is the Mustang evolved? Okay, so you get it, and it has this Mustang has a socket head cap screw in the differential instead of a hex head bolt. Is that Mustang evolved? Well, maybe because it was easier for the manufacturer to obtain that socket head cap screw at the time. But as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's no longer evolved because you can't get those socket head cap screws. The only thing you can get at Walmart is probably the hex head bolt. So because the environment has changed, is determined whether that Mustang was suitable or not, or whether it was evolved successfully or not. So just that example right there tells you mathematically to evolve something by indistinguishable differences, it doesn't work. Especially when the whole idea behind evolution is to explain definable species. You're trying to have definable animals, definable species, but you're using something that cannot define anything.
What we're doing is the tail wagging the dog. We're looking at present species and trying to extrapolate into the past. But then how do you? And they're trying to. And that's why all these missing links, they keep coming up every time they discover quote something. It's a missing link. They find out these 10 other missing links. This doesn't. It doesn't really work, or they end up with dead end branches all the time. This nice little evolutionary tree that people have been raised with, at least you and I were. When we were growing up, though, especially the descent of man type thing, it doesn't exist.
The march of progress.
The march of progress. It doesn't really exist, let alone for any other creature. Every other creature has to have that same thing happening. So, now we're getting to the.
Well, that's not even logical.
That's the fourth point.
This is the funnest point for me because giving this some thought. Evolution depends upon this idea of natural selection or selection pressure, meaning if you put take an organism and you put it in an uncomfortable environment, it's going to begin to change over time to get comfortable with that environment. Okay. So for a organism to be in an uncomfortable environment, it will have a high selection pressure on it, meaning it's not evolved. Okay. So in order for that organism to be defined, first of all, you're going to have an evolutionist tell you, okay, so where was that organism found? All right. Then what is that organism? That evolutionist is going to have to go back and get his book. He's going to have to define and tell you exactly what that organism is. It's a pig. It's a Hampshire pig.
Of course, they get their one half the time.
Okay. Then, with those two pieces of data, he can compute the instantaneous selection pressure on that pig, say. And if that pig has a non-zero selection pressure, that means that pig is a failure. That pig is not evolved. If that pig dies and you dig up its bones and say, hey, look, I found a fossil, you're not going to be able to use that fossil as an example of evolution.
A pig and a poke?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Right. So, anyway, but they anthropomorphize, they really put godlike powers to this random or this natural selection idea. It's almost, how advanced...
Maxwell's demon, you know, it's
Right.
the old demon sitting out there making these selections.
Yeah, I mean, that's why there's no logic in this. It's like,
Yeah.
you basically you're gonna get God out of the equation. Number one, because you don't want to be held responsible. You want to live the way you want to live. That's the real issue. But the science, but then you put it back in under some non-intelligent thing that just picks and chooses what small parts are going to be going to maintain or continue on there. Even though many of these things we found out won't even work for it would be hundreds of thousands to millions of years till it's finally to a point where now that it's been worked on for 100 million years or 500 million years or even even 2,000 years. Why will the organisms keep carrying this dead weight until the time when the environment suddenly needs an eye?
And
Or
say,
whatever
say
else
for
it
instance, that
is.
eye finally does come to fruition, and you determine that the selection pressure on that eye is 0. Well, the whole idea behind evolution is the existence of selection pressure. So if you have a 0 selection pressure, what you just said is that creature did not evolve because it has a 0 selection pressure. Therefore, evolution did not exist.
So you've got a paradox there.
Yeah. So either evolution is present and it's failing, or it's not present at all. And for evolution to succeed, it can't exist.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a definite paradox.
Yeah, because for it to succeed, it has 0 selection pressure. If there's 0 selection pressure, there's no evolutionary process.
Well, Derek, it's been a pleasure having you on our
Wow, that's
show.
showing fast.
This is a lot of fun. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.
I love it, man. Yeah, I wanted to get that last in there.